What do you do when you find yourself in a situation where your best is not good enough? Or where there's some defect in you that seriously limits you? It's something that's really humbling in your life. You might describe it as a weakness. It's painful and you feel like you're being tormented. The obvious answer is that you pray and you ask God to change the situation, to take it away. And it's not even as if God ignores your prayer or tells you to be patient. He flatly refuses, not going to take it away. And this just keeps on happening. Now, some of you are worried that this sounds like I've got a serious lack of faith, or that I've given in to the COVID-19 negativity. Others are looking at their own lives and saying, yes, I have things in me that fit that description. But those of you who know my devious personality probably suspect that I've been setting you up, and I have, because what I've just described is an incident in Paul's life.
Therefore, in order to keep me from becoming conceited, I was given a thorn in my flesh, a messenger of Satan to torment me. 3 times I pleaded with the Lord to take it away from me. But he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore, I will boast all the more gladly about my weaknesses, so that Christ's power may rest on me.
It turns out that Paul's weakness did not matter. It turns out that Paul's weakness did not limit God. It didn't even limit what God could do through Paul. Now, obviously, weakness here means inability, not sin. Paul is not saying that he delights in sin. And we come on to this great line, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. But before we get to that, you need to realize that this whole thing makes Paul think differently. He moves from being frustrated by his weakness, annoyed by it, limited by it, to delighting in it, making the most of it, boasting about it, because he came to realize that it did not depend on him, on his strength, his wisdom, his ability. It depended on God. Now, most of us think it does depend on us, and that drives us to do our best, which is a good thing. But Paul comes to realize that this can also hinder God, that God's strength can shine through our weakness, that God doesn't just use us despite our weaknesses. Sometimes he uses us because of our weaknesses, that our weaknesses let God do his thing. For when I am weak, then I am strong. So whatever weakness you might have, you need to start seeing it as a place where God can do his thing, where Christ's power can rest on you, where his grace can be sufficient, and where his power can be made perfect in your weakness. What is God's grace that's sufficient? Well, the obvious context is his power. That's what it's paralleled with. God doing in us and through us what we don't deserve and what we can't do by ourselves. It's God's provision in every conceivable sense. It's God working out his purposes in us in such a way that people see him and not us, and he alone gets all the glory. God seems to like using broken, worn-out tools. God seems to do his best work with cheap and flimsy. God can use a blunt chisel as well as a sharp one. A God who can use our strengths, but can also use our weaknesses just as well. My personality type means that I'm aware of my weaknesses. But like Paul, I don't let them faze me. For when I'm weak, God gets to be strong in me. Will you give your weaknesses to the Lord today? You kind of got to surrender them to him. Will you let him do his thing in them? Your weaknesses do not limit God. So stop stopping at I can't and continue with but God can. God's grace is more than sufficient for your weakness.